What if I told you the iPhone 18 might be announced in a completely different Apple than the one we know today? Or worse, an Apple that's quietly panicking behind the scenes. Executives are leaving, leadership is shifting, Intel is somehow back in the conversation. And the future of the iPhone might depend less on technology and more on who's still left in the room. Stick around because by the end of this video, this entire situation is going to make way more sense, and honestly, it's wilder than anyone expected. Hey, welcome to our channel. If you love tech, Apple drama, and those moments where the curtain gets pulled back just enough to make things uncomfortable, you're in the right place. Today, we're talking about Apple, the iPhone 18, and what might be the biggest internal transition the company has faced since the Steve Jobs era. Not rumors for rumors' sake, not clickbait panic, real shifts, real departures, and real consequences. Let's unpack this like we're making your morning coffee, bold, essential, and slightly alarming if you think about it too long. Over the past few weeks, something strange has been happening at Apple, and it's not just one headline, it's the pattern. Big names are leaving, not quietly, not one at a time, but in waves. Jeff Williams, one of Tim Cook's closest and most trusted executives, stepping away. Alan Dye, the design leader behind Dynamic Island and Liquid Glass, gone, heading to Meta. Apple's head of artificial intelligence, the guy brought in to finally make Siri feel like it belongs in the modern era, also stepping aside. And suddenly it doesn't feel like coincidence anymore. This is the kind of thing that makes you pause mid-scroll and go, okay, what's actually happening here? Because Apple doesn't do chaos. Apple does choreography. Every move is planned years in advance, every transition carefully staged, which is exactly why this feels so unsettling. These aren't replaceable roles. These are people who shaped how Apple thinks, designs, and builds products. When that many leaders walk out at once, it's not just turnover, it's identity shift. Now, there are a few explanations floating around, and none of them are boring. The most innocent version is that this was all planned long ago. Careers end, people retire, new blood comes in, and corporations keep moving. That explanation works until you remember this is Apple, a company famous for secrecy, stability, and long-term succession planning. This many high-profile exits clustered together feels less like routine and more like reaction. The second explanation is where things start to click. Internally, Apple has reportedly been preparing for Tim Cook to step down possibly as early as 2026, and when leadership transitions are discussed behind closed doors, people make decisions. Some choose to stay and adapt, others look at the future and decide they don't want to be part of that next chapter. Whether it's disagreements over direction, leadership style, or creative freedom, the result is the same. People are leaving before the handover happens. And then there's the third explanation, the one that hits hardest if you love Apple the way a lot of us do. Apple simply isn't the company it used to be. Under Steve Jobs, Apple broke rules. Under Tim Cook, Apple mastered efficiency. That made Apple the most valuable company on earth. But it also made it safer, slower, and less daring. For some creatives and engineers, that's not inspiring anymore. And when you see where they're going, startups, rivals, experimental teams, it feels less like betrayal and more like restlessness. What's fascinating is that Apple has already survived at something like this before. When Jony Ive left, people panicked. Design was dead, magic was gone, and yet, in a strange twist, the Mac got better. More functional, more powerful, less obsessed with thinness at all costs. So this moment could be the same kind of shedding. Painful now, beneficial later. Or it could be a warning sign that Apple is losing the very people who know how to push it forward. And here's where things get even more interesting. In the middle of all this internal shakeup, Apple is reportedly considering something that would have sounded insane just a few years ago, working with Intel again. Yes, that Intel. Before you panic, Apple Silicon is not going anywhere. This isn't Apple crawling back to the past. This is Apple rewriting the rules. The idea being discussed is that Apple would continue designing its own chips, just like it does now, but outsource some manufacturing to Intel for lower end devices, budget Macs, entry level MacBooks, possibly even budget iPhones down the line. Think of it this way: Apple stays the brain, Intel becomes the factory. That's a very different power dynamic than the old Intel Mac days, where Apple had to adapt its entire product strategy around someone else's roadmap. If this works, it could mean cheaper devices without sacrificing Apple's performance edge. And if you've ever winced at MacBook prices, you already know why that matters. It also hints at something bigger. Apple is preparing for a broader, more segmented future, more devices, more price tiers, more risk. Which brings us to the iPhone Fold. Yes, it's real. Yes, it's coming. And yes, it's going to hurt your wallet. Apple is reportedly moving forward with a foldable iPhone for 2026, and not as a niche experiment. Production numbers suggest Apple believes this thing will sell, and sell well. It's expected to launch alongside the iPhone 18 Pro models, potentially branded as an iPhone Ultra. Price estimates? Somewhere between $2,000 and $2,500. That's not a phone you casually upgrade to. That's a statement product. Apple isn't just selling hardware here. It's selling ambition, exclusivity, and the promise that foldables finally make sense. And knowing Apple, they won't ship it unless they believe they've solved the problems everyone else rushed past. Now, layer that on top of another massive change. Apple may be splitting the iPhone launch cycle entirely: Pro models and high-end devices in the fall, base models and more affordable options in the spring. That's a quiet admission that the iPhone lineup has become too big, too expensive, and too diverse to move as a single event anymore. And suddenly, everything connects: the executive departures, the leadership transition, the Intel partnership, the foldable future. Apple isn't collapsing, it's restructuring in real time. The question isn't whether Apple survives this era. The question is whether this next version of Apple feels bold again or just better optimized. Quick pause. I'm genuinely curious. Do you think these departures are good for Apple or bad for innovation? Drop your take in the comments. I want to see where you land on this. Here's the part that really sticks with me. The iPhone 18 isn't just another number. It might be the first iPhone built, planned, and launched by a leadership team that looks completely different from the one that shaped the last decade. That's not scary, but it is significant. Apple has reinvented itself before. Sometimes it stumbled, sometimes it soared, and right now, it's standing at another one of those crossroads. If you enjoyed this deep dive, hit that like button. It genuinely helps more than you think. And if this is your kind of tech storytelling, subscribe. You belong here. This is where curiosity meets impact. Stay caffeinated. I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.